What's going on, everybody? I have Mitchell Gladstone here, covers Arkansas State for the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. What's going on, Mitchell?
It's going well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. We're going to break down. Miami just recently got a commit, transfer, Norchad Omier, a very interesting player, 2 years, very good 2 years at Arkansas State, Sun Belt Player of the Year. We'll get into some things. I want to break down his game and also Defensive Player of the Year, which I definitely want to get into his defensive side. But let's start with his offensive skill set, what he's bringing to a team, just what he brings to on the offensive side of the court.
Well, you look at him. I mean, he's a guy who he took a huge leap. I mean, he had 12.6 points his freshman year, his first year, I guess you should say. I guess technically he's got 3 years of eligibility because of his COVID year. So his first year he came in 12.6 points, 12.3 rebounds, has always been a double-double guy on both ends of the floor. But then this year he ups his points from 12.6 to 17.9. He became, really the lead scorer for Arkansas State. They had a team that had a bunch of really good guards around him. Some veteran guys, a younger guy in Desi Sills who transferred in from Arkansas. So they had a bunch of guards, but he's still the lead scorer. And like you said, he really is a true post player. He's only taken 6 3-pointers in his entire career. As this year went on, he started to expand his game a little bit more, and you would see him, taking shots on the free throw line. He's a good free throw shooter. So when he, plays out of the post and does get fouled, he's generally pretty good at the line, and he's able to pick up lots of points there. But really, he is a true post player. Second chance opportunities, playing off the block, things of that nature. And he's really mastered it for a guy who is only 6'7" and 232. I mean, he knows how to use his body. He understands space. He's really physical. And so, even as an undersized big man, he had no problem when he was going up against someone like, well, I guess actually probably, struggled a little bit more. One of his worst games was against Louisiana when he played Theo Akuba, who's going to Ole Miss next year, struggled against the Texas Tech, but against Sun Belt competition, he really just dominated on his way to, as you said, Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year.
You touched on his post scoring, finishing around the rim, finishing the paint, the two-handed dunks definitely stand out when you watch his highlights. What is it about him inside the paint? Essentially 10 feet in, and certainly right around the basket. It seems to have a good feel. What allows him to excel in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on the dunks. He's really good in transition. If you do get a fast break, he will run the floor. He is relentless running the floor. So that's the thing. As soon as he understands, okay, I'm a post scorer. As soon as we get the rebound, we're going. And so you'll see him. He'll take a straight line drive up the middle, set up on the block. If he doesn't get there, like I said, they had lots of guards. So those guys might drive, and he knows where to put himself to get a rebound, get a second chance opportunity. And he's just strong. I mean, I think, like I said, 232, I think he's probably, he might even be more than that now. And he's put on so much weight, and he's just gotten a lot stronger. And I think the biggest thing for him is, this is only really his 3rd year of really high level basketball. He played some in Nicaragua, obviously, before coming to Miami prep for high school, but he only played 1 year of high school there. So really, he's only played 3 years of serious high level basketball. And so one of the things about his offensive game is it's still developing. And that's the crazy part with him. He's 20 years old, and he still has a lot of room to grow. So from a perspective, really just in terms of talking his whole game, but definitely offensively and defensively, he knows what to do. But offensively, he's still going to have to expand his range. He's still going to have to, I would think if he wants to be an NBA player, like there was talk of him potentially doing this year, he's going to have to, at least add the threat of a, 17-footer and maybe a 3-pointer. And so those are the things that have to come next in his offensive game. But, he's got the post game, pretty much locked down.
Let's stay with his shooting. You mentioned that a couple of times. The 3-point shot's not there. You touched on expanding his range. This is a guy that, shot over 70% from the free throw line. So there is some, touch there. What do you see with the shooting ability? And then also, with that in his game, do you think it's something that he can kind of grow into? And obviously, if he's getting a lot of points in the paint, it's hard to go away from that. But just his shooting ability, and also, how much has it changed from his first year at Arkansas State?
So it's funny you say his first year, because I only got to see him really play last year. I only covered the team last year, so I didn't get to see him his freshman year. Like I said, he's only taken 6 3-pointers in his career, and he's only hit 1. So, as far as what he can do, it's been very limited. We haven't seen it per se. Now, I think when he did take his extended, jump shot out toward the free throw line, it's decent form. It's not bad. It's not herky jerky or anything. It's relatively smooth. Most of his game is pretty fluid. But I think it's just a matter of putting in the time. I mean, that was the biggest thing I was curious to see about him this summer, regardless of where he was that he was going to probably have to spend a lot of time just working on that jump shot and getting it better. But that's the biggest thing with him, is that he has shown the ability to put in the time. One of the things that I thought was pretty remarkable was early in the season. It was, I guess, right at the end of November. He had a game against Morehead State. It was a blowout loss, like a 20-point loss. He scored 9 points. He picked up, I think, 3 fouls in the first 10 minutes or something like that. Was in foul trouble the whole game. They played 2 days later. Coach Mike Bellato brought him off the bench, not necessarily as a punishment, but to sort of get a message through his head. And they had a conversation right around that time. And it was basically, just because you were, Sun Belt Freshman of the Year doesn't mean you have it all together. You really have to work at this if you want to be good. And from that point, it seemed to really get it. I had a conversation with Norchad, and he really understood. I think that conversation resonated with him. He ended up ripping off, I think, after they played Texas Tech later, that a couple weeks later, then he went on a stretch where he had 10 straight double doubles in a row. He had 46 double doubles in his one season at Miami Prep. So he's a guy that understands, that you do have to do that work. And it seemed to resonate with him as his career's gone on. I do have, I'll be curious to see, how he handles the bigger stage, how he handles. I mean, the fact of the matter is he probably will be in a, not have to be in the number 1 role at Miami, which is ultimately probably a good thing for him, because I don't know how he would. I mean, we saw how he handled it, but the idea of getting that hype and handling it was something that he had to figure out this year. So even though he's going to a bigger school, going to be in a major metro market where he has been before, but really being under the bright lights, he doesn't necessarily have to be the number 1 guy. And so I think that's going to be good for him, in terms of his development and allowing him the time and space to really work on his game, because there are, like we said, there are still things for him to work on and get better.
You touched on a few of his games last season, the Morehead State UMKC combo there with Coach, and Arkansas State 18-11, so a good season by that, winning season and whatnot. I'm curious about the Illinois and Texas Tech games. Those stand out to me in terms of he didn't have great games. Those are 2 big-time teams in terms of that Power 5 conference game. So essentially, what kind of happened in those games? Or it looks like 2 different types of situations there. But what were your thoughts on how Norchad played in those 2 games, the 2 more high-profile games on his schedule last season?
Well, it's funny. The Illinois game, I remember, it was obviously, going into the season, there was big hype over it. I was fascinated to see how he was going to go up against Kofi, and then of course Kofi ends up getting suspended, not playing in that game. So that game, they just sort of got run off the floor. And Texas Tech, they were down early, and basically they held within 20 for the entirety of the second half. Sort of just hung around, never really got close to make it a close game. But really, during that early portion of the season, I don't necessarily specifically remember what the foul situations were in those 2 games, but early last year, foul trouble was a big problem for Norchad. He just struggled with, being smart, understanding, okay, just because I am a big man and I'm going to be banging with these big guys, I'm still only 6'7", I'm the smaller guy in these cases, and how to manage his fouls. And so it was something where, like I said, really during that first stretch of the season, he struggled. And so, I think, I can't remember which one of those games, I believe it was the Illinois game. He just did not play nearly the number of minutes that he might have played normally, just because he was in foul trouble. So those are the things where, for him, those games just really got off the rails early and never got on track. And as the season went on, he managed his fouls. He still had games where, foul trouble became an issue, but he got much better at managing it. And, he and Mike Bellato, the Arkansas State coach, have a really good relationship. Mike is also a Spanish speaker like Jim Larrañaga, so I think there's some connection with Norchad, being from Nicaragua, being a native Spanish speaker, and he and Mike had a very good relationship to the point where they would communicate in Spanish during the game from the bench to the sideline and on the bench, and so they understood how to work with each other, and I think wherever Norchad goes now, obviously at Miami. There's got to have to be that understanding of, yes, he's still a really young player. So when he gets in those situations, especially again in the ACC where it's a different level of competition to the Sun Belt, there's going to be the physicality. He's going to get into foul trouble. I can almost guarantee it because he likes to be physical, but like I said, he's a smaller guy and he's still learning how to play the game. So just trying to understand how that will work for him and how he can manage that. It's really, it's still going to be a learning process.
Going back to his senior year there at Miami Prep, class of 2020, did not have a star ranking, clearly under the radar as a guy, made immediate impact, without a doubt at Arkansas State. What do you remember about, or, kind of looking back at that? Did you know that the coaches had a good idea of him, even though you weren't exactly covering him, but did you get a sense that they expected him to be a good player?
So I give all the credit to my former colleague who did a great story last year. You can go read it at arkansasonline.com about Norchad's rise from Bluefields. It's a town of about 55,000 in Nicaragua. And the long story short was the president of the Nicaragua Basketball Association saw him play. I mean, he was a guy who played multiple sports growing up. He could throw a baseball 95 miles per hour, allegedly, when he was 16 years old. And so they saw him playing basketball. January 2018, he did a camp in the States run by, or actually I can't remember if it was in the States, but he did a camp run by Miami Prep coach Art Alvarez. That was the connection to Miami Prep. That ultimately brought him to Miami for his senior year of high school. Mike Bellato, the Arkansas State coach, is a protege of Art Alvarez. And so that was the connection from getting him from Miami to Jonesboro, Arkansas. And I don't know that there was, real expectations for, that it could go this high, this quickly for Norchad. But I think there very much was a sense that this guy has a ton of untapped potential. And I give a lot of credit to him. I give a lot of credit to Mike Bellato, who is a former Rick Pitino assistant at Louisville, and is a very good basketball coach. Although he's had his issues, getting things really going here at Arkansas State. He has done a good job in recruiting, and Norchad was the jewel of it, getting him from, like you said, a no-star prospect out of Nicaragua, the first Division I player from Nicaragua, to Arkansas State and now to Miami. So, it's like you said, it's a development, and that's something that I don't think they necessarily, like I said, they didn't have the expectations of it, but I think they understood that there was a lot to work with, and they certainly made the most of it. And Norchad's really made the most of it too. You can't, as much as you want to give all, you can give all the credit to the coaches. He's a guy who's clearly put the work in, and is putting himself in a position to have this opportunity now.
And you mentioned Coach Alvarez, certainly Miami fans, if you followed the basketball scene in Miami for years, Coach Alvarez, going back to the Miami Tropics days, guys that, were under him that end up at Miami, Denny Clemente, Guillermo Diaz, or a couple guys there. So defensive ability with Norchad, again, the defensive player of the year in the conference last year, the analytics are good. They're certainly favorable in this area with his game. Also, counting stats good too. The blocks and steals, a guy that averaged 1.5 of each. Not many players around the country are doing that. But let's start with let's stay with that defensive ability overall. Your thoughts on him as a defender?
He's truly like, one of those guys that you can play 1 to 5. I mean, I don't necessarily want to compare him to someone that folks in Miami know very well in Bam Adebayo, because Bam's a lot bigger than Norchad. I mean, I think Bam's 6'10", 6'11", and Norchad is only 6'7". But he is one of those guys who is competent at playing 1 through 5. You can't really put him in problems because of pick and roll coverage. He's able to do that. He's a guy who is very athletic, played multiple sports. So, he can play the guards, but he also understands how to be physical, how to deal in the post. He can play up. There are plenty of guys, like I said, Theo Kuba, Alil Nosaseme, guys like that in the Sun Belt who are big, strong, physical players in the post. And he understands how to do that. Really, like I said, really crashed the glass extremely well. And so just having really good hands, I think that's the biggest thing. That's how you get those steals. That's how you get those blocks. He's got really good hands, and I think that comes from playing multiple sports. So, he's like I said, everything with him can be more refined. That's what's going to be so interesting to watch. And I know I'll be watching. I'm a Duke grad myself, so I'm very curious to see how someone like that fares in the ACC, because it is, like we said, a completely different level. Guys who are more skilled, guys who are bigger and stronger. And so the question is, can you ramp up what Norchad did in the Sun Belt defensively? Because that's, like we said, I think that's the end where he's going to excel. I think we will see, unless he becomes a 3-point shooter, I think we will see his offense drop off a little bit, just because he is going to have problems with the size on a consistent basis. But I think, he's still plenty big. He can guard multiple positions, and I think he will be a immediate impact defender at the ACC level.
I touched on the metrics there. His defensive rating ability there and per 100 possessions is in the 80s, which is certainly good. For people that have watched this channel, evanmia.com clearly gives favorable defensive metrics. The DPR there is 28.7, which is tops in the conference. Really, the next highest guy is around 18. So clearly, on the metrics, he's doing real well there. The rebounding stuff is really impressive. He's been top 5 nationally in rebounds per game both seasons while at Arkansas State. What does he do so well, averaging 12 rebounds a game there? What does he do to excel in that area?
Well, there's a couple things. Number one, his offensive rebounding rate is plenty good too. He has a really good second leap. He knows where to position himself. Like I said, when guys are on the break, he gets second, third, fourth. I think there was at least a couple times when I saw him getting fourth, fifth chance opportunities. So he is a guy that is just relentless on the offensive end, and that's obviously an easy way to rack up rebounds. But he just plays hard. I know it sounds cliche and it's really simple, but that's something where I think, for a guy that understands, I'm not necessarily going to be the biggest. I'm just going to have to use my motor. He does. And I'll be curious to see if he can up if he does up his minutes. He still only played, I say only, he played, just under 20, a tick under 29 minutes per game, which is not necessarily, a bad thing if you have rotational depth. The thing is, like we said, the foul trouble kept him off the floor at times. And, in theory, a guy like that, who's the player of the year, you would want to see him, especially in conference play, playing 36, 37, 38 minutes, if he is that good and that impactful. So I will be curious to see if, okay, can he maintain the motor for, and play, potentially play those full minutes. But then again, maybe he's not doing that at Miami in the role that he's playing there. So, but just rebounding, it's just the energy. It's consistent. You're going to get that. I think most people here were, surprised when he didn't get a double-double. They were surprised when he sometimes didn't have 10 rebounds in the first half. That happened plenty of times this season. He's just, he's doing it from the jump. You'd look up and at the first media timeout, he'd have 5 and 5. And you're just like, how? But that's because of the way he plays.
Appreciate your time, Mitchell. The complete rundown, without a doubt, on both ends of the court. It'll be very interesting to see how he develops. But Mitchell, I appreciate your time, taking the time to do this. Hopefully you take care.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.